I'm actually going to read the short story that Joyland published. It's called Mother Mary Full of Grace. When Mary and Ben had sex, he filled her with 1,000,000 babies, but then didn't ask her to marry him. "Don't you think we should?" she asked. She had dreamed that she would first be married if she were to have a single baby, let alone 1,000,000 of them. But Ben shrugged and told her that he wasn't really in that place in his life, and also he wasn't even sure that the 1,000,000 babies were his, a comment that cut a chasm in Mary's chest, and she did not call him again, not once during her pregnancy. They were Ben's babies, but she wasn't about to suffer any more of his cavalier disregard. He didn't seem that bothered. He called once to see how she was, but then took her silence to mean that the babies were not in fact his, an assumption Mary could live with. Ben had proved himself irredeemable. He was only an okay lay anyway. He probably wouldn't make that great of a father, and he didn't seem to understand the importance of cunnilingus, and so he could go fuck himself from now on, because Mary sure wasn't going to. And so Mary's body grew, and it swelled, her face, her neck, her arms, and her legs, even her feet, which surprised her, and she wore sandals every day, even though it was winter, her toes fat and swollen and freezing. It was gradual and sudden, and her tits hung heavy, and her stomach became an unwieldy thing she could not avoid bumping, swishing, knocking about, and she had to pee, always, always, always she had to pee, the babies crowding her bladder. "I only gained 15 pounds when I was pregnant with you," Mary's mother told her, which was a lie, because Mary had seen pictures of her mother when she was pregnant, and she'd been a hippo, a hungry, hungry hippo, and Mary was not about to be shamed for gaining 1,000,000 pounds when she was pregnant with 1,000,000 babies, so she just said, "Sure, Ma, sure." "It totally blows that you can't drink right now," Mary's friend told her, which was a bitch thing to say, especially while sipping a Bloody Mary with a pickled cauliflower garnish that looked good enough to fill Mary's heart with resentment so thick, so opaque that she could not see through it. Mary didn't call her for brunch anymore, because if someone said the phrase "bottomless mimosas" to her one more time, her face would explode in a mushroom cloud of rage. And the 1,000,000 babies grew and grew and grew inside her, always growing, and now they jostled for space, pushing against Mary's organ, and especially her bladder, and pushing against each other, and she was so hungry all the time. She craved things like pickled herring and kimchi, cotton candy and cashews, but mostly the coffee she knew she should not have anymore, which did not stop her from sitting in coffee shops just so she could smell it. Even decaf has caffeine, all the mommy blogs told her, and she listened, but she hated them for their insistence and for loving their pregnancies so much. How could anyone love being the size of a planetoid? Strangers touched her stomach without invitation. "You look like you're going to pop," Mary's sister told her, and since Mary was incredibly constipated and had been for the last month, she imagined this was a true and fair thing to say, even if she didn't much care for hearing it. Her sister was much younger than her, however, and was easily forgiven. And with Mary's belly full of the heft of 1,000,000 babies, her sister was displaced to the floor in front of the couch that Mary took up entirely as they watched the whole fourth season of Breaking Bad. So in a way, they were even, both uncomfortable, both with aching backs, and their shared discomfort made Mary feel fractionally less alone. When Mary's water broke, she was alone, and she got to the hospital by a cab whose driver did not seem at all concerned that Mary was going into labor, not sensing her urgency or ignoring it entirely, waiting for the light to turn green before taking right-hand turns, and generally driving the exact speed limit, a habit that irked Mary on the best of days, but especially so on this, the day that she was about to birth 1,000,000 babies. She clutched her pre-packed duffel bag to her chest and tried not to think about being alone. At the hospital, she was given her own room so that the staff could handle the volume of her offspring once they were born. And so in the hours while her contractions came closer and closer together, she was alone, save for the beeping of the hospital machinery, occasional nurse visits, and the drumming of her own interior monologue that asked, "Are you a terrible mother already?" over and over and over again, and there was no one there to answer it. A nurse made an incision from the southern tip of her vagina to her anus so that the 1,000,000 babies could exit without tearing her, and Mary could not even feel it, the pain of her cervix dilating and of the children that she would birth who would live and also inevitably die. So immense was this pain and this knowledge and this labor that the pain was universal. It was the only thing that existed. And so what was an incision between her vagina and her butthole in a moment like that? There was no one there to hold her hand, and so she gripped the sheets, her hands wound into fists. She wailed to no one. And all at once, the babies came slithering out, first 1, and then 30, and then 999,969 more. 42 of them were lizards. 73,323 of them were stillborn. And 14,683 of them were of indeterminate gender, and 77 were born with vestigial sixth fingers and toes, and 14 had bright red hair, even though Miri and Ben both had black hair. One of them was a pearly pink bowling ball, weighing in at 12 pounds. The rest were boys or girls, weighing in between 7 and 10 pounds each, and they all came out screaming. The nurses sewed the incision back together, so Miri had 2 strictly delineated orifices once more. The lizards crawled away, and Miri wept, for she had no idea where they went, and she was ready to love a lizard baby just the same as a human baby. In her backyard, she buried the 73,322 babies who never once breathed air from their own noses or mouths. She tried her best to kiss each one of them goodbye and to lay them in their graves gently, but she also had 926,635 more babies to care for and to feed. Her garbage was full of diapers. When she grew 1,000 more breasts, she was not surprised. She needed each one to feed the babies that were always hungry, 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 and even with 1,002 breasts, she still could not feed them all, and 3,416 of them died of starvation, and she buried them with their brothers and their sisters. She wondered who fed the babies that were lizards, and if the lizards were safe. And since Mary did not even know 923,219 names, she called them all baby, my babies. And they cooed and cried and crapped in their diapers as babies are wont to do. And soon they were talking, syllables at first and then words and then sentences. And they asked her things like why and how, but mostly why and also what. And Mary answered as best she could. She answered their millions of questions with all the patience she could muster, even though by then she had not slept in 4 years, 2 weeks, and 29 days. By this time, 282,074 more had died, and one had spontaneously transmogrified into a large black bear that visited the backyard, but only sporadically. 47 of them had run away or gotten lost, Miri wasn't sure which, and she had a missing persons out on all of them, but the police didn't really take her seriously, saying that no one could possibly lose 47 children at once. And then one day, Miri ran into Ben in the park. She was doing her best to hold several thousand hands in her too, and always one baby was just on the verge of slipping away. Ben had been jogging. He looked good, but older, and had a wedding band on his finger. And he asked how Miri was, and he motioned to the babies, of which there were now 642,512 left. About 300,000 of them looked very much like Ben, and he said so. And Miri told him it must be a coincidence. She had not dated in years, but she was still better off without a man like Ben, and the sureness she felt bolstered her heart. She was not alone. She was surrounded by babies who weren't babies anymore, and she marveled as they began to grow names like Bill and Lee and Philip and Yesenia. And she did not call them baby my babies anymore, not out loud. In the bath, Miri counted each one of the stretch marks left by the million babies on her belly and bottom and thighs, especially on her thighs. There were a million marks for each one of her million babies, alive or dead, bowling ball or bear. Her back ached from the weight of her 1,000 breasts, and always knocking on the bathroom door were the babies asking when it would be their turn and was she done yet. She took her time anyway. And in the backyard, Yesenia spotted lizards. Thanks.